Hello and welcome to this edition of VAT Update from Tax Essentials for Advisors. My name is Ed Thompson. In HMRC news this week, we'll look at alternative evidence for VAT recovery and some updates to HMRC guidance on that. In cases news, we'll look at a case about mega marshmallows and whether those are confectionery for VAT purposes. And we'll also look at another case on single and multiple supplies in the context of luxury hampers containing food and drink. And our VAT tip this week will look at what you do when you're struggling to get a VAT invoice from your supplier. First up then is an interesting update to HMRC's manual on alternative evidence for VAT recovery when you don't have a VAT invoice. We'll have a further look at this in our tax tip today, but broadly, if you can't get a VAT invoice, HMRC has these discretionary powers that allow them to allow VAT recovery if you can provide alternative evidence that showed you incurred VAT on your costs. You may recall from previous editions of this update that HMRC has had a couple of slaps on the wrist recently in the tribunals and courts for not exercising these powers reasonably. This update to the guidance may well be in response to this. A newly added section makes it clear that if satisfactory alternative evidence can be provided to HMRC, then HMRC officers should exercise their discretion normally, provided there is no grounds to suspect abuse or fraud. Also, if an HMRC officer doesn't allow VAT recovery, they should make it clear on what basis they have reached that decision. There's also a specific piece of guidance on a tricky situation that crops up from time to time. For certain property transactions which are subject to VAT, a fixed charge receiver selling the property on behalf of a dissolved company may not be able to legally issue a VAT invoice because the company doesn't exist anymore. This guidance helpfully now makes clear that in this situation, a letter from the fixed charge receiver setting out certain details, including the amount of VAT, should be acceptable evidence for the purchaser to be able to recover VAT. Now, we haven't had a weird food case for at least a few weeks, so it's nice to have a case on mega marshmallows. This one might seem a little bit like deja vu, and that's because it's been through the tribunals and courts already, but the Court of Appeal has sent it back to the first tier tribunal to look at again. And the central question is whether these mega marshmallows are confectionery for VAT purposes and therefore standard rated, or whether they fall within that broad zero rating that exists for food. The VAT legislation says that confectionery includes any item of sweetened prepared food normally eaten with the fingers. The first tier tribunal now only had a very narrow question to look at. Are these big marshmallows normally eaten with the fingers or not? The tribunal decided that it was more common that they would either be roasted and eaten from a stick or roasted and eaten as a s'more between two biscuits than they would be eaten with the fingers. Therefore, they weren't confectionery and the zero rate applied. Our other case this week touches on another of our favourite themes in VAT, single and multiple supplies. And the question is this: if I sell a luxury hamper of food and drink in a nice lidded wicker basket, is the basket a separate VAT supply in its own right? And so do I need to apportion some of the payment to that? Or is the basket just ancillary to the food and drink in the hamper? Now, the first tier tribunal decided that the basket here was just a means of better enjoying the food and drink. Therefore, it was ancillary and not a separate standard rated thing in its own right. So another win for the taxpayer. Now, last but not least, for our tax tip, we're returning to the topic of alternative evidence and what you can do if you can't get a VAT invoice from your supplier. Well, as we've seen, HMRC do have these discretionary powers. They don't have to use them, but they are under an obligation to exercise them reasonably. My main advice would be do everything you can to get a valid VAT invoice in the name of the business if you possibly can, because it makes life a lot simpler. But if you can't, you can think about asking HMRC to allow VAT recovery based on alternative evidence. And that could include a combination of things like supplier statements, bank statements, and other evidence of payment by the business. If you try to go down this route, make sure you document your efforts to get a VAT invoice and why you couldn't get one, because that will put you in the best possible position to argue your case with HMRC. As always, thanks very much for listening, and I look forward to another update in a couple of weeks' time.
Thanks, Ed. Mega marshmallows and luxury hampers in one update, making me feel the urge to do some online ordering. Don't forget, you can access our entire range of content on the Tax Essentials for Advisors website. For more information and to book a demo, visit the link shown here. Until next time, bye for now.